Hello.
Hey Jules, how are you?
Hi. I am so excited to talk to you and to have you on the podcast.
Me too. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. Of course. So, the queen itself, when it comes to self love, self care, all the things. Now, Zoe, can you tell our audience and the listeners maybe a little bit more about you, who you are, what you do? Just go with the flow.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for the intro. Um, so I call myself a full-time manifester because basically the way I carry myself is being in this energy of always manifesting, whether I realize it or not, or whether I'm actively manifesting or maybe in some kind of resistance phase. That's still being in a state of manifestation. But outside of manifestation, um, my formal education is in psychotherapy. So
Mhm.
I am a registered psychotherapist who has also taken up mindset and manifestation coaching. I really wanted more freedom in my line of work because I know that I have the ability to help people. Um, but the psychotherapy realm is highly, highly regulated.
Mhm.
So that's why I decided to go towards coaching as well, so that I could have more
Yeah.
freedom and be able to connect with more women and work with them on their self love, building confidence, that kind of thing.
I love that. Absolutely. This is so beautiful, and especially I think self-love, like when it comes to self-love, there is so much out there, and like kind of like having a guide or someone who can show you even like where to start, I think is like something that most people need, or what I think for me by myself was really, really helpful when I first got into personal development and self-care, self-love. So, what would you say is self-love to you?
That's a great question because a lot of people think of self love as constantly being in a state of loving themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
while that's true, it's not that simple really. Because it is a work in progress. I think of self love as something that we need to maintain. It's not just something that we attain one day and then it's there to stick around. It's that commitment to ourselves, regardless of what we may have going on, or regardless of if we're not feeling the best about ourselves. It's just
Mm-hmm.
knowing that there's that unconditional love there for ourselves. A lot of it for me revolves around self acceptance. I
Mm-hmm.
think this conversation is coming at a really great time because I recently have had several things going on in my life that it feels chaotic, and it has attempted to distract me from my self love. But the way I've carried myself through it is still engaging in gentle self talk. It's not
Mm-hmm.
always about, if, say, I'm in a sad mood, it's not always about saying, no, no, we're not sad. We
Mm-hmm.
need to be happy. It's more so having that gentle self talk of, I give myself permission to feel sad. I'm still worthy, even though I'm upset about something right now. I still unconditionally love myself, even though I may be struggling right now. And so it's embodying those facets of self love, even when there are reasons not to, or even when we
Absolutely.
feel like we can't or we shouldn't. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so that's what I would say self love is to me.
Absolutely. I love this definition so much. And I think especially what you said, like when it comes to like this whole journey of life, there are days that are not as great as others, and then
Yeah.
just knowing from the bottom of your heart that you got yourself. I think that is when it comes back to self-love, like that what it is, at least for me. But I like agree 100% on everything you said. And what would you say, like now on a little bit of like a personal level, if you feel open to, of course, sharing that with us? How was your transformation? I mean, over these last few years, when it comes to your personal self love journey, I mean, it's not like that from 1 to 100, obviously.
Totally.
Was it difficult? Did it take time? How would you describe it?
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked this because my journey, it really is a testament to that. It's not an overnight thing, and it's not something that you necessarily decide to go after and then it happens right away, which is where the commitment piece comes into play. But so I learned about manifestation when I was a teenager several years ago, like maybe about when I was like 16. So that would have been about 14 years ago because I just turned 30 last week. But
Yay!
but you kind of dip your toes into it, and then it's this little voice in the back of your head where it's like, okay, like that's interesting. Is it too good to be true? Is it whatever? Is it, you're kind of like not skeptical of it, but you're just kind of like, oh, okay, cool, like would love that. And then it's there. But then it doesn't really, for me at least, didn't really go away until I started to dive deeper into it. So my journey with when I started taking manifestation and self-love very seriously was when it started about just about 4 years ago when I found myself in a very toxic relationship. I was working a job that I hated, a corporate job that I hated. I was burnt out. I was living in a city away from my friends and family. I felt so isolated. I wasn't doing things that I loved as often as I would have liked. I had major issues with like confidence and my image of how I like thought of myself and felt about myself. I just was in a very bad place. And then I realized that I had been waiting for a convenient time to start to feel better. And I was kind of like an observer to my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I had what I call the moment, the aha moment, where you have this epiphany of like, wait a second, what am I doing with my life? What's going on here? Why am I not changing my course right now? Um, and I started to step into the reality of there's no convenient time. There's no perfect time. There's not a time where I'm going to feel ready. Ending a long-term relationship is hard. You're constantly in a battle of choosing familiarity over what you know is best for you. Um, Quitting a job is hard. You're kind of letting go of security. Moving cities is hard. Like these things are not necessarily easy, but what's harder, staying in a stuck space or going after what you know you're worth and what you ultimately want? So I had this actually wild couple of weeks where I left my relationship. A week later, I quit my job. And a week after that, I booked a flight to Australia. I live in Toronto, Canada. So it was like a whirlwind 2 weeks. And I just was like,
Wow.
I, I think the accumulation over several years of choosing everything outside of myself, it got to a point where I was so uncomfortable in those situations. And I was so uncomfortable with myself that I was like, Zoe, make a choice. Are you going to stay uncomfortable like this, staying small, or are you going to get uncomfortable growing, choosing your self love? So I kind of went full ham and just did all of the things all at once. I know that's not something that is for everyone, so to say, but I'm a Sagittarius. I fully dove in with both feet. I was like, screw it, I'm doing it, I'm going all in. And yeah, then I went to Australia. This was right at the height of COVID. Or no, maybe it was 3 years ago. Yeah, so it was right at the height of COVID. I went to Australia. Um, really stretched out my time there. I was also planning on backpacking Southeast Asia, but I spent about 3 months in Australia solo traveling, and one of my best friends lives in Australia, so I saw her, which was very like therapeutic. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
we're going through moments of transformation, we really, it's important, like the tribe that you select to be around you, because everyone's energy is contagious whether we realize it or not. You're most
Yes.
like the people you spend the most time with. So that was very key in my transformation. And on that same note, the person that I spent the most time with in those 3 months in Australia was myself. I wasn't distracting myself with surface level friendships. I wasn't like like surrounding myself in work environments that were toxic. I was just sitting with myself, sitting with my thoughts, spending time with myself. And when you're first getting started on a self-love journey, that can feel so uncomfortable, and it can a
Mm-hmm.
lot of resistance can come up. And I say when that resistance come up, sit in it, get to know
Mm-hmm.
yourself, embrace the discomfort. Which kind of goes along with what I was saying about the self-love piece. It's like true self-love isn't trying to distract yourself from any quote unquote negative emotion that comes up. It's learning to accept yourself regardless of that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the journey that I went on a couple of years ago. And since then, it's
Wow.
just been going after it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So would you say this was like your turning point, like Australia and sitting with yourself, as you said, like making these uncomfortable moves? What that was that kind of like this whole turning point that then got the ball rolling and like you basically like stepping into that version of yourself that you knew you deserve.
Exactly. Yeah, I would definitely say so. Because when you're I'd kind of put myself in a position to only rely on myself. And that was kind of scary as someone who in the past would always have someone, a friend, a family member, or a partner be there for me whenever I would need it or however I would need it. And I'm talking as simple as like going to the movies or going out for dinner or getting a coffee with myself. Those are things that I didn't really do alone. When you're solo traveling, you're solo. You're like,
Yes.
of course, you're like meeting people, but like when you first are like checking into a place or going for a walk on the beach or whatever, like you're by yourself. It's kind of up to you to either put yourself out there to meet other people or sit with yourself and spend time with yourself. Um, but yeah, it was definitely like Australia is so special to me for that reason. And I also just find like being near the ocean and being near the
Mm-hmm.
beach very transformative. It's very like vibey, I guess, not to sound too cliche, but when you're
Totally.
sitting like on the edge of the world looking out and it's just vast water, you're just kind of forced to reflect. You're forced to express gratitude. There were, of course, moments where I felt so sad and like, oh, I just want to go home and like see my mom or see my best friend when you're processing a breakup. But spending those moments with yourself and being in a place that is so supportive of that transformation, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing like it.
It's so interesting because I have gone through the exact same in Australia as well. Like I like I had no idea that like Australia has kind of like this healing vibe to it maybe, but honestly, same. Like it was 2019 that I went heartbroken to Australia by myself, solo traveling. And I, when you were talking about like these sad moments, I remember actually Bondi Beach, me, 19 years old, bawling, like crying, my eyes out, being so sad about like not being at home and making this uncomfortable move, being by myself. I felt at times I felt so lonely, but then it was the best decision ever. Like I made tons of friends in Australia, like during this whole time, these 12 months, 10 months I was there. So many friends, amazing conversations. I got to know myself more, huge turning point. So definitely like changing or like, how do you say, you take this kind of like uncomfortable pain short term because it'll eventually turn into long term happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think also like when you look at the geographics of Australia, like Australia is in its own little corner of the world. So unless you're from
Yes.
Australia, which if you are, like that is amazing.
Lucky you.
So jealous that you're near the beach all the time. And I just find Australian culture to be so chill, but in a very like authentic way. I don't know. We could talk about that too.
Yes.
But for anyone who's not from Australia, like it's a hike to get there. Like you're pretty like figuratively isolated and literally isolated. But for in our cases, like that was what we kind of needed. We
Need
needed to
it.
just be with ourselves
Yes.
and trust ourselves and put ourselves in situations where we could grow and embrace that
Mhm.
discomfort, because it's so cliche. It's said over and over again, but it's cliche and said over and over again for a reason. Growth comes from discomfort. You can't like, nothing will change if nothing changes. Like, what do they say the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Like, you have to do something different if you want something different. If
Mhm.
you have this vision of something for your life, the fact that you're having that vision means that it's possible for you. It's a matter of if you're going to pay attention to it or not. And I kept having these pings of like, why do I keep feeling like I can do more with my life? Why do I find myself so uncomfortable in situations? I was a like serial corporate employee, meaning like I've worked in so many different industries, Jules. I've worked in the fitness industry, in the research industry, in the finance industry, in the taxes industry. I've worked in the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry,
You did
and
it
it took
all.
me. It took, but the valuable part of that is that what I learned is that I was relying on the novelty of a new job every like 6 months to 2 years to kind of keep me afloat, which is when I realized, oh my gosh, I need to be my own boss.
Mhm.
I can't keep relying on the novelty of a new industry to keep me afloat. And underneath it all, I still had this passion for like personal development and psychology. I did my undergrad in psychology. I did my master's in counseling psychology. So the human behavior, the mind piece is there. Like, I'm very intrigued in that, but it was the personal development side that was kind of missing, and I just
Mhm.
kept jumping from job to job, and that's when I was like, okay, I need to really listen to my intuition here. There's a
Mhm.
reason why this is coming up, and I really need to focus on that. And that's when I took that plunge a couple of years ago, started my master's. I'm just about finished it now, and starting my coaching business. I'm at the very early stages of my coaching business, so very excited. But yeah, there's been so many like uncomfortable
Breakthroughs.
moments and breakthroughs, exactly. And like,
Mhm.
there have been so many opportunities for me to give up or for me to say, screw this, it's too hard. But it's what I said earlier about like, pick your hard. Like, yes, it's hard right now, but what's harder, going back to a life that I didn't love?
Exactly. Exactly. That was just actually my next question would have been, you kind of like already answered it. Now, for someone who's listening right now, like being stuck, unfulfilled in a place where she just doesn't want to be, maybe in a relationship. Well, we both have been there in a relationship that is toxic and just like not at all aligned. What is your advice, your piece of advice that maybe you would even give to your younger self, being like, that's it?
I would first tell to any woman who's listening to this who resonates with that situation of feeling like they want more, they want to get out of a situation. Your intuition will never lead you astray. Your intuition will never, never, ever lead you astray. Um, and part of diving into your own self love and your self trust is trusting your intuition. And to take that further is to start telling yourself a different narrative. Like, instead of saying a breakup will be hard, tell yourself, I can do hard things,
Absolutely.
because you can. Younger
Yes.
Zoe can. Younger Jules can. Present Zoe and Jules can. Anyone who's listening to this can. And when you start to go after those hard things, that's when you notice real transformation. I would also say, and this is one that I still say to myself, especially when I'm starting anything out, I'll remind myself of a time when I considered not doing something because it was hard, but then I did it anyways. And what happened? I was fine.
Yes,
We
exactly.
always will get through it if we
Mm-hmm.
believe we will. And it's just a matter of what kind of discomfort you want to sit in. But I also want to just send empathy to any woman going through that because it's so hard, especially when you're dealing with situations where you might be feeling insecure or manipulated, or like you're not worthy of having like deep love where you feel supported. If you're feeling those things in any situation, job, relationship, whatever it may be, that's your intuition trying to speak to you. That's your opportunity for you to develop your self love and your self trust. And paying attention to it and listening to it is the first step to that transformation. And if it's something you've never done before, of course it's going to feel uncomfortable and unfamiliar. But it's through that unfamiliarity where you start to get to love yourself and trust yourself. Um, yeah, and I think what I said earlier about um, if you've never done that before, like of course you're not going to have the idea of like it's going to be easy, or like waiting for the right moment or waiting for the time where it's easy. Well, if you've never dove into that before, if you've always settled, that moment's just not going to come.
Yeah.
If you've conditioned yourself, or if
Tough
you've
love.
yeah, or if you've been conditioned throughout our lives, which we all have, to wait for a better time, or it's just not the right time, I want a more convenient time, like if that's the narrative you're telling yourself, then it's just not going to happen. You just have to decide for yourself, I'm done feeling this way. Let's do the other hard thing, which will leave me feeling better in the
Mm-hmm.
future. And what people will notice is when you make that decision, you will feel this sense of relief. It'll feel
Mm-hmm.
scary. You'll feel overwhelmed. You'll feel like, what did I just do? To that, I say, feel those feelings. If you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you have to cry, cry. If you feel angry. Do some rage work. If you feel in those moments where you feel excited and proud of yourself, celebrate yourself. Whatever emotions come up, don't deny them. Feel them. Get to know your emotions.
Yes.
Sit in that unfamiliarity of, oh my gosh, like I'm randomly dancing on my couch right now. This is weird. I never do that. And then next thing you know, you're doing that every morning as like your
Absolutely.
pump up, right? I know that you're a dance party girly, so
Oh,
um,
loving it. You too.
oh yeah,
We are.
it's liberating.
Yes.
It's like we've become so detached from our inner child. Like think back to when you were like a 5-year-old kid, you would dance to any song. When babies hear music, they start to hover.
Yeah.
Like that's something we unlearn. Well, let's relearn it.
Yeah, totally, totally. Which is again also part of self-love, I feel like. Just being that authentic and that honest with yourself, allowing yourself this kind of like expression, that expression of I'm doing what I do. If I want to have a dance party in my yard and my neighbor sees me, well, whatever, you know?
I
Yeah,
think also
absolutely.
when we do that, it's when other people see us, which is when the breakthrough happens. And there's two sides to this. The first breakthrough that will happen is that you will start to feel comfortable in your own skin, and you will start to not care as much what other people think, which is amazing.
Mhm.
And the second thing that will happen, which is arguably more beautiful, by giving yourself permission to be your authentic self, you're giving other people permission to be their authentic self. When other
Absolutely.
people are seeing you just say, screw it, I'm having a dance party right here, right now,
Yes.
the people that judge you for that, it's really just a reflection of them wanting that for themselves. But what I found will happen, and I've noticed in myself too, based off of the people that I've seen who have given me permission to be myself, when that judgment first creeps in and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're being so weird. I'm like, oh, wait a second. I think they're being weird because I want that. My first judgment is that that's weird because it's actually something that I want. So instead, you practice that self awareness piece where it's like, never mind, it's not weird. It's actually an invitation for me to do the same.
Absolutely. This has happened so many times to me. Yeah, I can agree 100%. And this is like the beauty of personal development, being able to now see it and realize it and notice it, like be aware of that it's actually not that that person is weird, but that there's something inside of you, deep, deep, deep inside of you, that maybe you admire that person, maybe you want to do the same or something similar, but you were conditioned or trained or like programmed not to do it.
And over time, the more that is conditioned, the more our inner child is like scolded for doing something that we thought was fun, or like we got in trouble or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
The more we detach from our inner child, and then next thing we know, we're adults who have forgotten how to have fun, who have
Yes.
forgotten to just do something silly, to just feel silly,
Mm-hmm.
and who are easier on themselves. You won't hear a kid say to themselves like or like you won't hear a kid call themselves an idiot for making a silly mistake, right? That's something that's learned
Yes.
over time,
Because
something
you
that I've
hear
started
it.
doing. Yeah, you hear it and then it
Yes.
becomes ingrained in your mind. And then it's like, next thing you know, for doing something that is not, you're not, it's not warranted to call yourself an idiot, but yet here you are calling yourself an idiot for making a silly mistake that isn't even really a mistake. It's just a learning opportunity. Something that I've started doing in the name of self love is I've started really having boundaries with how I speak to myself when I make a mistake. This is going to be like a funny admission, but when I was
Tell
a
us.
teenager,
Tell us. Tell
I
us.
read the Twilight books, and by read I mean like I was obsessed with them. And for anyone who's not familiar with the Twilight series, basically about vampires and werewolves. A vampire and a human fall in love, but basically the vampires, they don't need any like sustenance; they're just immortal. Versus humans, we need sustenance, we need sleep, we need food, we need we need those things to survive.
Yeah.
So Bella, the main female character, she would often say to Edward, like, "Oh, I just need a human moment," like when she would need to like brush her teeth or like eat food or whatever. And so what I took from the Twilight books is having a human moment. Sometimes I need to have a human moment. Part of the human experience is being imperfect. It's making mistakes. It's having flaws. And so
Mm-hmm.
whenever I quote unquote make a mistake, I just am like, oh, I just had a human moment. It's not a big deal.
Oh.
I just say to myself, like, as an imperfect human, I'm allowed to make mistakes. Something I've shifted in my self talk is I don't call myself names. I don't say I'm a loser, even if it's sarcastically. Our subconscious cannot discern sarcasm. It just hears what it hears, and that's what it embeds. So instead, I'll say, like, oh my God, Zoe, you silly goose. Like, do you remember being called a silly goose as like a 5-year-old? I just remember that was such a prominent term, but my dad would be like, "Oh, we're silly gooses. Like, we're just so silly." And that's like a funny term to me. So now when I make a mistake as a 30-year-old adult, I'm a silly goose. I am not an idiot. I am not a loser. I'm a silly goose. That's it. It doesn't get further than that. And then
I
I
love
just
that.
give myself a hug. Sometimes I quite literally will give myself a hug, kiss myself on the hand, rub my
Same.
rub my shoulder, pat my
Same.
knee. Like sometimes we need that physical proof of self-love. Here's the thing about self-love. Sorry, I keep jumping from topic to topic. But
All
here's the
right.
thing about self-love and affirmations. When you're starting out on your self-love journey and like saying affirmations or starting to tell yourself that you're worthy and you love yourself, it doesn't even have to be true at first. You just have to make the conscious decision to start saying it. One day you'll say it and you will just feel how true it is and how real it is. And it comes from that repetition. It comes from that commitment to yourself. It comes from deciding that you are worthy and that you are someone who just loves themselves. It doesn't matter what happens.
Mm-hmm. This is so true. And actually, again, you answered my next question, which was like, what is a tangible step, or it's like a thing that you do on a daily basis? And I guess like to show yourself self love. And I guess it's like the hugging and the kissing. And this is something that might be in the beginning, I think, for someone who is just on the journey of like getting into self-love and self-awareness, is like weird. Like, why should I hug myself? Why should I kiss myself? But it changed for me. It changed the game. Like, I remember I actually was, again, also in 2019, when I started telling myself, Jules, I love you, or like literally talking to myself, being like, I love and accept myself fully the way I am. I was actually like thinking about it. I was in a very very bad toxic relationship, I had an eating disorder, which is obviously the opposite of self love. So I was not loving myself. I was constantly comparing myself to others, but I started to take this decision for myself, for my life, that something needs to change again. And here, being like, I'm just gonna start doing this thing. I'm gonna hug myself. I'm gonna look myself into the mirror and tell myself these things, even though I don't believe them. But I just started doing it. And as you say, fast forward, maybe it took 1.5 to 3 years, however long it takes. But fast forward, I tell myself, I love you, or again, I love and accept myself fully. I embrace myself, and I feel like, oh, I enjoy it. Like, yes, I do. I do. And I feel it on a soul level. And I'm like, wait, how did that happen? But it happens.
Yeah.
It
It's the
happens.
aha moment. One day you're just like, oh my gosh, I just realized I am obsessed with myself. I love myself so much. I'm obsessed with my self-love. I just know that I'm worthy. It doesn't matter like any outside thing that's trying to tell me that I'm not worthy. I just know that it's not true because my love for myself is so true. You're so
Yes.
right, Jules. It just comes with that repetition. And to what you said about people just learning about this and feeling like this stuff is weird, or it's like, I'm not going to like tell myself I love myself in the mirror. That's weird. I would ask those people, well, what you're currently doing working? There's a reason why you're here listening to this podcast episode, or why you've stumbled upon this message. To anyone
Absolutely.
who thinks it's weird, and I 100% agree with you. When I first started doing this, I said to myself, "Oh my gosh, like I'm uncomfortable. This is so weird, but Zoe, I love you. Cool, it's done." It was like a cringy, like, oh, like I'm
Just get it
cringing at
over. Like, just
myself.
let's just get it over.
I would never admit to anyone I'm doing this. It's so weird. Like, what if they judge me? But that's more of a sign that you need to do it. The cringier at the beginning, the better. And eventually the thing that will be cringy is that more people aren't doing this. As funny as that is to say, but it's like, to me now, the cringy thing is not doing these practices every day. And to answer your question about what people can do, even though we already spoke a little bit about it, something that people can do to start to rebuild their self love and their self trust is to keep one small promise to themselves every day.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where people will fall into like that cycle of like, start when they're highly motivated, keep going for a couple days, they'll miss a day, then it get inconsistent, and then it trails off, and then next thing they know, 30 days later, they're back at the start, repeating the cycle. So where that cycle starts is someone decides they want to improve themselves, their self-love, their confidence, and so they decide they're going to do so many things all at once. I've decided, as someone who's never meditated or never journaled or never said I love you to myself, that I'm going to start meditating, journaling, saying I love you to myself. I'm going to EFT tap. I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to go to bed. It's like you're overstimulated. Like, it's just too much. Our
Too much.
brains
Yeah.
can't adapt that quickly. And the point is that you just have to start, and you can do this by keeping one small promise to yourself every day. When I say small, I mean small, and I mean make it easy for yourself. One that I started with when I first started on this is, the promise that I kept to myself is, when I'd wake up, within 5 minutes, I'd have a sip of water. I made it easy for myself by keeping a glass of water beside my bed. I'd wake up in the morning
And you have a sip of water.
and I
Yeah.
have a sip of
Which is,
water. And guess what? I've kept the promise to myself. When you do that 30 days in a row, your subconscious, your mind just starts to believe that the promises you tell yourself, you're just going to keep them. Then you can piggyback that. Okay, I'm going to have a sip of water, and I'm going to say something nice to myself.
mm-hmm.
Still super easy. It doesn't require a lot of effort. It doesn't require like anything excessive. And then over time, compounded, that trust just starts to rebuild. So that's another good one that people can take away too.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was incredible. I have learned so much by myself, and I'm sure the audience did as well. Now, let us know, where can we find you? Instagram? Is there any website you have?
Thanks, Jules. I'm so happy to have been here. I love having conversations like this. And
Same.
I know that you're so, like, your energy is just so magnetic. And so you can feel your genuineness. And I love that. I'm so happy we were able to connect. But yeah, so I can be found at Zoe.Magnetic on Instagram. And I have my website launch coming up soon, and it's just Zoe.Magnetic.com. So you can find me there, and that'll be launching in the next couple of weeks, which I'm so excited for. And then my coaching services are launching in the new year in January 2023, which is very exciting as well. But I
Yay!
would say those are the best places to find me.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna link all of it in the show notes below, and this episode will go live when it's already 2023. So, and this is like the perfect start. Like us having this conversation, I feel like is when you listen to this right now, then this is meant for you. Like you needed this conversation, and I hope that you could take so much from this because I think, yeah, it's just a great way to start your 2023 with more self awareness, self love, of course, and knowing that there are not only Zoe and me, but there are so many out there of us wanting you to succeed and wanting you to get into this journey.
With this episode coming out in the new year and with all of that noise of new year, new me, really take this as your sign to not overcomplicate it. All it takes is one step. And then from there, the rest is history. So, yeah.
Yes.
And I totally love what you
Ah,
said, Jules. We want everyone to succeed, whether you're learning from one of us or from another coach. It's not even about the message that is it's sent. It's about the energy that of working with someone. So I love that. I think that's beautiful. And that's just a testament to how powerful coaching can be.
or even just us spreading this message here. If there's someone who is listening and coming back to the podcast, maybe not quite there yet to be like, okay, I'm going to invest into my personal development or into my life, into myself, but just coming to the podcast is already an investment because it's an investment of time. Time is so valuable. So I think that we should just give a massive, massive thank you to all of you guys who are listening right now. And also, of course, Zoe, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing
Thank you,
with us
Jules.
your journey, your wisdom. I am so, 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 so thankful.
I'm so grateful to be here, Jules. Thank you for having me.